Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, the key to PMP exam success. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Welcome back. This is part 2 of our lesson on the control communications process, and I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. In part 1, we gave you the overview and looked at our inputs. Now we're moving on to part 2 with the tools and techniques, outputs, the review, and also sample exam questions. We have 3 tools and techniques in this process for us to review. We have the information management system, we have expert judgment, and we have meetings. Expert judgment meetings, we've seen those definitely in other lessons previously. So let's now take a look at these tools and techniques and see why they are so useful in controlling communications. According to the PMBOK guide, information management systems are facilities, processes, and procedures used to collect, store, and distribute information between producers, consumers of information in physical or electronic format. Reflecting on this definition, particularly on the first 2 of the highlighted words, information, we know that there is a ton of information on project costs, schedule, performance, among others, which need to be produced, in this case by the project manager and the project team, and communicated to the consumers of that information, namely the project stakeholders. Information management systems provide us with the facilities, processes, and procedures to handle all this information. Let's take a look at some examples of information management systems. Some are very basic, while others are quite sophisticated. By definition, the system does not have to be electronic or computer-based, so hard copy document management systems can be used for letters, memos, press releases, and other communication documents. Then there are also electronic communication management systems, which include email, voicemail, and web publishing. Electronic project management tools can provide spreadsheets, graphics, various reporting functionality. Some examples include web interfaces for scheduling and project management software. Virtual office support software and portals are also used to control communications. It works best if you first look at and understand your project and your stakeholder requirements in order to decide whether an information management system is required for your project, and if so, if a basic or more sophisticated system is appropriate. Sometimes it's a good idea to seek help from experts who are not directly involved with the project. They can bring a fresh perspective to the project, its direction, its issues, and so on, that may not be obvious to the project stakeholders who are too close, maybe, to the project itself. So seeking expert judgment provides an opportunity to enlist others to assess communications impact, need for action or intervention, actions to be taken, responsible persons, and time frames for taking an action. And as you can see here, expert judgment is an art. And why do I say that it's an art? It's an art because the team needs to learn when to consult with other units within the organization, or use consultants, or select industry groups, or seek input from non-project subject matter experts, the SMEs, or get input from the project management office. You don't want to use these people too soon or too late or in a frivolous manner. You want expert opinion when it helps the project. It's something you learn. It comes with experience. It's developed over time. It's an art. Before we take a look at the outputs of control communications, we have one more tool and technique, everybody's favorite tool: meetings. Well, maybe not everyone, but your project simply cannot succeed without meetings. Meetings involve discussion and dialogue among project team members to determine how to best update and communicate project performance. Also to allow the team to decide how best to respond to stakeholder information requirements. let's take a closer look at meetings. And we'll take that closer look by looking at the 5 W's of meetings. Who, what, when, where, and how. Okay, the last one is an H, but there's a W in there. You'll get the idea. All right, so who to invite, who must attend, who is optional, who will facilitate or chair the meetings. This is one of the first aspects of your meeting that you have to go and consider. Then you have to think about what are you trying to accomplish? What is the goal of your meeting? When should you hold the meeting? A 15-minute daily stand-up meeting in the morning could work for one project for a particular purpose, but may not apply to all projects and serve all purposes. Where are you going to hold the meeting? Do you hold the meeting at the customer or supplier's location, or it might make more sense to hold the meeting where the team members or majority of the participants are located? Something you have to figure out. And the last W, okay, the last H there, the how. How do you want the meeting to occur? It could be a face-to-face meeting, it could be a meeting over a phone, a teleconference, or you could be video conferencing this for virtual meetings. All of these aspects need to be considered before you're calling a meeting. So in review, meetings are an important tool that needs to be used judiciously if you want participation and result. The question is, how can you have more effective meetings? Set the meeting. Here is where those various aspects that we just looked at come into play. Consider location and duration of the meeting. Communicate an agenda and objectives before the meeting starts to all of your attendees. It's important also to choose the right stakeholders who attend the meeting and to bring the appropriate materials. Who can make decisions? Who can pave the way? Who can facilitate a decision? What reports or other information should be available before or during the meeting? And selecting the meeting venue and the format will also encourage the discussion and the decision. So some of these things, they seem more like common sense, but they are still important to keep in mind. Do these things and you will be controlling communications and getting results in a timely manner. All right, so we've looked at all our inputs, we've shown them to our experts and gotten their opinion. We looked at our information management tool. We held several meetings on the topic of controlling our communications. Now what? Well, we're getting to the outputs here. And in regards to the outputs, we have created the following: work performance information, change requests, project management plan updates, project documents updates, as well as updates to our organizational process assets. After all, we learn from what we do, and we therefore want to update the outputs with current information so accurate and timely decisions can be made about the project. That's why we have 3 out of these 5 outputs as updates to something already existing. If you recall, the PMBOK guide defines our first output, work performance information, as the performance data collected from various controlling processes, analyzed in context and integrated based on relationships across areas. So, performance data consists of the feedback from stakeholders on communication or results from surveys on communication effectiveness. An example of performance information would be the analysis of the raw data of responses that might be communicated to stakeholders. So much for the definition of work performance information, but what are you supposed to do with work performance information? Do you know? You don't? Well, then look it up. You will find the answer in your communications management plan. And once again, we see how one piece of the puzzle fits into another, how controlling relates to planning. In the communications management plan, we defined who needs what information in what detail and at what time intervals, and in control communications, we create outputs based on what we documented in the communications management plan. Work performance information provides status and progress information on deliverables, change request status to see if work has in fact been done, and forecasts such as estimate to complete of a work package or a project phase. It is information that is tailored to the stakeholder needs and communicated to them as requested. Let's say that you're working on a project where your forecast has changed. What do? It does not necessarily mean that you must take action just because a forecast change. Perhaps you estimate that your project will be a week late. Well, it's acceptable and you need to take no action at all. But if you need to take action, then you need to create a change request. And there are different types of change requests. First, corrective action. This comes into play when we see past performance that is not desirable. We use variance analysis to determine the cause for this, and we issue corrective action that should help us eliminate the cause and also reduce or remove the variance. Maybe we noticed that our project status reports that we send out on a weekly basis are way too frequent, and we need to send it out only once every 2 weeks so that people actually will read them every 2 weeks. That could be a corrective action when it comes to communication. The second type of change requests are preventive actions. This comes into play when the result of our forecasts are unfavorable. Let's say we predicted that we will be 15% over budget and we don't have that kind of money. So we now issue a preventive action to avoid that this situation is going to become reality. So you see how we use corrective action and preventive action at this point. But wait, aren't there other types of change requests as well? Yes, indeed. We also issue change requests when we want to update formally controlled documents like the project management plan or project documents or organizational process assets. And if you think back to our last 3 outputs, what were they? They were updates to the project management plan, the project documents, and updates to the organizational process assets. We can't just update them willy-nilly. We have to issue a change request that we want to update these documents. That change request is then processed through the integrated change control, and if approved, only then is it implemented. Simply put, when the control communications process triggers any change, it may need to be reflected in the project management plan. For instance, the communications management plan may potentially need updates. Well, we just changed the frequency of our status report from weekly to every 2 weeks. We need to document that somewhere. The communications management plan seems like the right place. Other areas that might be impacted by this result are the stakeholder and human resource management plans as well. These updates mean that the changes have been applied to the plan and that the stakeholders are now also made aware of it. And this is controlled communication at its best. We make a change and we inform about the change. If you issue a change request to update your project documents, it doesn't necessarily mean that your project is no longer on track. No, whether the project is on track or not, behind or ahead of schedule, there still may be the need for updating your project documents. One might think that if the communications process and the projects are working as expected, well, there's probably not much to do. However, your communications management plan might still dictate that you report that this is indeed the case. We are reporting on, well, really nothing. Everything is going according to plan. In other words, it be stated somewhere in your project documents that the project and its communication processes were monitored and that everything is on track, that there are no new issues, and that the project is performing as expected. It's a rather bland and not interesting type of information, but frankly, I'd much rather receive this kind of information than, oh, we're 5 weeks behind. Well, then on the other hand, if the project is not on track, and by that could be a positive or a negative variance to your planned performance, updates may have to be made to various project documents. For instance, forecasts, performance reports, and the issues log may need to be updated. These documents, along with others used by the stakeholders, must be kept current. Otherwise, timely and accurate decisions cannot be made by the stakeholders. Controlling communications means that these documents are current, accurate, and available in a timely manner to the project stakeholders if they need them in order to make decisions. Organizational process assets serve as inputs to many processes. That means their accuracy is integral to a successful project. Failure to update them in a timely manner will have significant negative impact on the project. As you control communications, it may be necessary to update existing assets or create new assets. For example, you may update policies and procedures. You may update lessons learned databases or reporting formats. These may not seem to be as important as other organizational process assets to a project. However, these artifacts bring understanding, clarity, and direction to this project that you are running and other projects that other project managers throughout your organization are running. They are the project's infrastructure, and if they are weak, then there is a high probability that the project will falter and possibly collapse, all because of a lack in reporting formats. And this completes our discussion of the control communications process. Let's review. We covered the essence of the control communications process, how it is all about monitoring and controlling communications, ensuring stakeholder information needs are met, and guaranteeing optimal information flow to your stakeholders. We discussed how project communications management is iterative. Control communications can trigger another iteration of your project's communications management processes, like you're going to go back to planning of your communications processes. In controlling communications, you need to compare communications against your plans, standards, and expectations. In order to do that, you need to understand your objectives and standards for communications. You use the project management plan in conjunction with your organizational process assets for this purpose. Then you can examine project communications and work performance data to see how you are doing. In addition, the issues log can inform the project team about issues with communications or may give you insight into other areas which may need to be communicated differently. The project team can use different tools and techniques such as information management system, meetings, and expert judgment to monitor and control communications. This can result then in the synthesis and transformation of the work performance data into work performance information. We see that within this process, a project manager has to control changes and recommend corrective or preventive action and other change requests related to communications. And after going through the process of controlling communications, updates of various kinds may be necessary, including project management plan updates, project document updates, and updates to your organizational process assets. And here is a sample question that you might find in an online simulator. Which of the following is an example of work performance information? Is it A, status of deliverables, B, planned versus actual schedule performance, C, planned versus actual cost performance, or might it be D, planned versus actual technical performance? I'll give you a second here to think about this. The answer is that status of deliverables is in fact work performance information. What you can learn from this somewhat sneaky question is that you must have a really good understanding of the difference between work performance data and work performance information. As we have seen in previous lessons, work performance data, that's raw measurements. Once you process and interpret that raw data further, then it becomes information. So in the project communications context, work performance information is the performance data collected from various controlling processes, analyzed in context and integrated based on relationships across areas. Status of deliverables is an example of work performance information. The other answers, those are examples of work performance data, which in fact were provided directly from the PMBOK guide in the Project Management Quality chapter. Before you take the PMP exam, you have to identify and clear up any misconceptions that you may have about project communications management. Here are some examples of common misconception. Tool selection for project communications management works best when it is based on the project manager's needs. That is an incorrect statement. Tool selection works best when it's based on the needs of the stakeholders. The issues log contains current issues, not resolved issues. Also incorrect. Resolved issues remain in the log for reference. And information management systems focus solely on controlling automated systems information. Incorrect again. Information management systems include hard copy document management, electronic communications management, and electronic project management tools. It is a very broad type of system. Let me leave you with a few final thoughts and tips for the exam. When it comes to questions about communications management, what we find in the commercially available simulators are situational questions that ask you to select the best way of how to communicate information to a given stakeholder. Control communications is no different. What you will find is that communications is not a clear-cut science. Many of the answers to the questions will just seem correct. You look at them and you think, yeah, that A, B, C, all of them could actually be correct. Let both your experience and your sound understanding of the concepts that are discussed in the PMBOK guide lead you to the best answer. Note that I didn't say the correct answer, I said the best, because all four of them may be right, but you have to be able to select the best answer for the particular situation described within the PMBOK guide framework. And this concludes our look at the control communications process. Justine?
It's time I made a move.
Until next time.